It all started on an ordinary afternoon. I had parked my car in the driveway, as I always did. It wasn't a big deal, just a regular spot on my property. But that day, everything changed. As I stepped out to grab some groceries, I noticed something strange. My car was gone. I quickly checked the street, but there was no sign of it. I thought maybe I had left it at a friend's house or parked somewhere else by mistake. But then I saw the dreaded note on my front door. Your vehicle has been towed for improper parking, it read. Confused and frustrated, I quickly grabbed my phone and dialed the number provided for towing services. The person on the other end told me that my car had been taken because it was parked on my own property. My mind raced. How could they tow my car from my own driveway? It didn't make any sense. I immediately contacted the Homeowners Association, HOA, assuming there must have been some misunderstanding. After all, I'd been a resident here for years, never once causing any issues. But when I spoke to the HOA representative, things took an unexpected turn. You've been warned several times, she said coldly. We have strict rules about parking, and your car was obstructing a shared space. I was in shock. I had no idea what she was talking about, and my frustration only grew as she continued to speak in a condescending tone. The HOA had always been strict, but this was ridiculous. That evening, I sat on my porch, feeling helpless. The situation had gone from confusing to infuriating. The next day, I made up my mind to take action. This wasn't just about a tow. It was about standing up against an organization that had clearly overstepped its bounds. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. The HOA had become a force in the neighborhood, controlling every aspect of our lives, from landscaping to what color we could paint our front doors. It was as if they had a hand in every decision that could affect our property, and yet they were never willing to listen to our concerns. I spent the following day digging into the HOA's regulations, searching for any mention of parking restrictions. What I found was even more disturbing. The HOA had a laundry list of rules, many of which were vague and subjective. For example, they could fine you for having a disorganized garden, but what did that even mean? Was a garden with a few weeds considered disorganized? There was no clear standard, just arbitrary enforcement. It was clear to me that the HOA had too much power. They could dictate where you parked, how you landscaped, and even what you displayed on your front porch. But now, they were taking it a step further to the point of towing cars from residents' private properties without proper justification. I realized that I wasn't the only one who had suffered under their heavy-handed approach. Other neighbors had mentioned issues with parking, landscaping violations, and even personal disagreements with HOA members, but none of them were willing to fight back. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to do something about it. This wasn't just about my car being towed. It was about the principle of the matter. I couldn't stand by while the HOA continued to exert such control over my life. The question was, what could I do? I was just one person, but I knew I couldn't fight this battle alone. I had been stewing over the issue for days when I ran into James, a neighbor I barely knew. James was an older gentleman who had lived in the neighborhood for years. He was known for his calm demeanor and his passion for community issues, though he rarely spoke out. He was sitting on the bench by the park, sipping coffee, and reading the newspaper when I approached him. James, I said hesitantly, I need some advice. The HOA just towed my car for parking in my own driveway, and I'm at a loss. Have you ever dealt with them before? James lowered his newspaper and glanced up at me. The HOA? Yeah, I've had my issues with them over the years. They can be pretty unreasonable, sometimes. His words surprised me. I had always thought of James as someone who accepted things as they were. But here he was, admitting that he too had been frustrated with the HOA. He went on to tell me about his own experience. He had once been fined for having a flag on his porch that he'd inherited from his late father. The HOA argued it was unsightly. They didn't even let him keep a simple memento from his past without trying to force him into compliance. It turned out I wasn't the only one who had suffered under the HOA's oppressive rules. James shared that he had been part of a small group of neighbors who had once tried to challenge the HOA, but the system was so rigged against them that they had given up. Still, he was sympathetic to my cause, and his words gave me the hope I needed to keep going. "I'll help you," James said, his voice firm. "But you'll need more than just a complaint. You need to show the HOA you're serious. Get a group together. You might just be able to change things." Armed with James's encouragement, I began to take action. I started reaching out to other neighbors, asking if they had experienced similar problems with the HOA. At first, most people were reluctant to speak out. They feared retaliation from the HOA, who had a reputation for finding any excuse to fine residents or enforce petty rules. But as I spoke to more people, I began to realize that many of them were just as frustrated as I was. One by one, I gathered a small group of neighbors who were willing to stand up. We met at James's house one evening to discuss our strategy. We didn't just want to challenge the towing incident. I realized that we had an opportunity to push back against the HOA's control over our lives. We could demand transparency, fairness, and a more reasonable approach to community management. We spent hours drafting a petition outlining the issues we had with the HOA's practices. We also collected stories from other neighbors, each one adding their voice to the cause. The more people joined our group, the stronger our position became. We were no longer a single voice in the crowd. We had the support of the community behind us. I could feel the momentum building. It was no longer just about me and my car. This had become a fight for fairness, and I knew that we had a chance to bring about real change. With our petition in hand and a group of neighbors ready to back us up, we took our concerns to the HOA board. The meeting was tense. I was nervous, unsure of how the board would react to our challenge. They were used to getting their way without question, and I knew they wouldn't take kindly to being questioned. When it was our turn to speak, James stood first. With a calm but firm voice, he addressed the board. "We're here today because we feel our rights as homeowners are being trampled," he began. "The HOA has overstepped its bounds, and it's time for a change." Each of us took turns speaking, recounting our experiences, and demanding that the HOA be more transparent and accountable. We pushed for clear guidelines on parking, a fairer process for enforcing rules, and most importantly, the end of arbitrary fines and towing. The board was defensive at first, dismissing our concerns as trivial. But when they saw the petition with dozens of signatures and heard the stories from their own residents, they began to waver. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that the HOA could no longer operate with the same heavy-handed approach it had for years. In the following weeks, the HOA made significant changes. They revised the parking regulations and implemented a more transparent system for enforcing rules. As for me, my car was returned, and I received an apology from the HOA, though it felt more like a formality than a genuine acknowledgement of their mistake. The battle was over, but the lesson was clear. Sometimes standing up for what's right takes more than just complaining. It takes unity, determination, and a willingness to challenge those who think they can control our lives without consequence.